Morning, everyone, and thank you for coming out this morning to the beautiful Lorain Palace Theatre. My name is Jack Hall, and I'm a candidate for sheriff for Lorain County for 2024. The importance of this town hall series that we are doing is to bring acknowledgement and recognition and also an understanding and education of not only the crime of human trafficking, but how it affects the victims and the survivors of human trafficking. We have amassed an unbelievable panel today, which I think at the end of the day today, that you will agree with me that they have some unbelievable experiences that they are ready to share with you. We will be doing an introduction of each member of our panel this morning, and after that, they will be introducing themselves, talking about their experiences, and we also welcome questions which will come from the audience. I'll come down off the stage and bring the microphone down there for any questions that anybody may have, because I think it's going to generate some questions today as well. With that in mind, I know through the words of song and the words of music, a lot of times that those words express a lot of things, hits us emotionally, and a lot of times song drives things to take a point and hit you emotionally and be able to understand what it is. So with that in mind with song, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce Sir Thriver Joe Williams.
Good morning. I'm gonna sing a song by Jewel. It's called A Life Uncommon. Don't worry, mother, it'll be all right. And don't worry, sister, say your prayers and sleep tight, and it'll be fine. A lover of mine, it'll be just fine. And lend your voices only to sounds of freedom. No longer lend your strength to that which you wish to be free from. Fill your lives with love and bravery, and you shall lead a life uncommon. I've heard your anguish, I've heard your hearts crying out. We are tired, we are weary, but we aren't worn out. So sit down your chains until only faith remains. Sit down your chains and lend your voices only to sounds of freedom. No longer lend your strength to that which you wish to be free of. Fill lives with love and bravery, and you shall lead a life of common. There are plenty of people who pray for peace, but if praying were enough, it would have come to be. Let your words enslave no one, and the heavens will hush themselves to hear our voices ring out clear with sounds of freedom, sounds of freedom. Come on, you unbelievers, move out of the way. There is a new army coming, and we are armed with faith. we must give to live. And lift your voices only to sounds of freedom. No longer lend your strength to that which you wish to be free from. Fill your lives with love and bravery, and you shall lead. Lend your voices only to sounds of freedom. No longer lend your strength to that which you wish to be free from. Fill your lives with love and bravery, and you shall lead. And you shall lead a life uncommon.
Joe, thank you so much for that. Before we have the panel speak about their experiences as to what they have gone through, I want to introduce our panel, and I'm going to start from my side right here. Tim Ott is the chair of the City of Green's Commission on Human Trafficking's task force. Now, this is unlike any other task force because what they have done in the City of Green is that they have combined basically all their major crimes into one task force. It's the Human Trafficking Task Force, it's the Drug Task Force, and also Sexual Crimes Task Force. And so therefore, it's a three-legged approach in order to be able to combat major crimes that happen in Summit County with Green. Tim has also served as a director of the Battered Women's Shelter. He was on their board, the Rape Crisis Center for Summit and Medina County, and also has served on the board of Remember Now, which is an international organization to prevent sex trafficking. Next to Tim is Dr. Jennifer Davis. Jennifer Davis's passion for advocating on behalf of others has been the benchmark on which she has based her career. Jennifer has worked in a variety of organizations which have allowed her opportunity to grow and develop her passion, from serving as an expert witness for the state of Florida, collaborating with top researchers to help develop best practices for working with individuals who have been victims of abuse, to working in addiction recovery. Jennifer has made it her life's mission to raise awareness on several taboo topics. Jennifer's educational background includes an undergraduate degree in psychology, a master's in clinical psychology, and a PhD in Christian counseling. She holds specialized certifications in human sexuality and birth to 5 attachment. Jennifer is a lifelong learner who always strives to ensure that those who most need a voice will be heard. Sitting next to Jennifer in the middle of our panel is Theresa Merriweather. Now, unique to Theresa, she is actually a resident of Lorain County, one of our own from Elyria. She's dedicated nearly 20 years of her life serving her community and advancing her education. However, prior to being able to embark on this professional life, Theresa's ambitions were detoured by the horrific experiences of being trafficked in the sex trade. Her faith, personal ambition, and perseverance instilled in her by her parents allowed her to escape the trafficker and fulfill her educational and professional goals. And she does this so she can help so many others. Ms. Merriweather attained a Bachelor of Arts degree in Sociology and a Master's of Science in Administration of Justice and Security. She's a certified forensic evidence technician and is currently pursuing her Doctorate of Business Administration. Theresa is a nationally recognized trainer for the issues affecting human trafficking, and she's seated on the Global Alliance of Human Trafficking Task Force, and she relentlessly pursues her ambition of rescuing and restoring victims of human trafficking. Seated next to Theresa is Samantha Floyd. Samantha has over 17 years of postgraduate experience in mental health, child welfare, public health, healthcare, college instructions, human trafficking policy, and racial justice. Samantha holds a Master's of Science in Social Work from the University of Tennessee and a Bachelor of Social Work cum laude from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. She is the co-founder of Justice Consulting, which is a volunteer organization with a mission to address racism and U.S. human trafficking responses. She developed and currently teaches Dismantling Privilege, a multi-series course which examines systematic racism in the United States. Ms. Floyd is a member of the United States nation's Delta 8.7 Policy Guide Markets World Working Group. She serves on the U.S. State Department's Human Trafficking Consulting Network, and Ms. Floyd is a part of HEAL, Trafficking Speakers Bureau, and was formerly the South Central Kentucky Human Trafficking Task Force Coordinator. Walking behind her now, as I'm going to introduce her and waving, is Dr. I got to flip my page over, Dr. Marlene Carson. Dr. Carson is a survivor and member of the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, which provides recommendations and counsel to national policy and government officials about programs that will end human trafficking. Dr. Carson has built multiple social enterprise initiatives to employ survivors of sex trafficking, including I Thrive Academy, the I Thrive Media Group, and the Social Justice Academy, which all provide vocational training opportunities for survivors and equipping them with the skills they need to thrive and gain employment. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you our panel. Oh. And Candace Williams, which I'm trying to look down she directly in the middle, raising her hand now. Thank you, Candace, and I apologize. Candace is no stranger to addiction. She experienced trauma and abuse as a result of her own family's dysfunctional behaviors, and as an adolescent, she was recruited into sex trafficking and soon became chemically dependent at the age of 21. As a functioning addict, she had to juggle being a single mother, all while attending school, but also while using methamphetamine. Like many substance abusers, Candace's dependency led to many unhealthy decisions, and she served 3 years in prison, which was her rock bottom. Ultimately, Candace went from prison to purpose, and for over 13 years, she has maintained sobriety and is the executive director of Rubies, which is a safe house for victims of human trafficking. Thank you, Candace. Sorry I missed you, ladies and gentlemen, our panel.
And Chief Hall, it would be an honor for me to be able to invite, there's 2 survivors in the audience, if they can come and also take their seats on the panel discussion. Rosita and Rolanda, please, it would be an honor. And Joe. Yes, Rosita and Joe.
And Tim, if you could please, I'd like you to start off with your story and what you've done in the...
Sure, Jack, thank you. And thank you, Joe, for just an incredible introduction there. Some of us have absolutely no voice at all, and that would include me when it comes to singing. But first, I want to thank all of you for being here today. First and foremost, I want to thank you for being here today. I would just introduce myself by sharing a couple of thoughts. One is awareness, and I'll speak a little bit about just the importance of awareness, but I want to commend you for being here today, because being aware of what's going on is, in my opinion, really the first and a very, very important first step in being able to combat, this insanity, okay? Awareness. And the other word that I would just share would be the power of one. The power of one person is absolutely incredible in this fight. Jack mentioned Dr. Carl Ralston, he was a Summit County residence guy, and he had an insurance agency. That's who Carl was. Married, had a daughter, and something happened in his life, okay, that just opened his eyes, the awareness, that he needed to do something. Well, I'm going to fast forward. Carl now leads an international organization that has 117 prevention homes with an average of about 15 to 20, 25 mostly girls, but some boys as well. So 117 homes in 16 different countries. The power of one. I don't know if I can think of much of a better example than Carl. It's incredible. It's important for us to know that, though, because so many times we feel powerless in a fight with something like this. We are not powerless. Okay, we are not. And each of us really can make a difference. And the last thing that I would share, just to kick my thoughts off, is I'm very fortunate to live in a community where people have come together. And it started off really as a drug task force, okay? The opioid addiction, heroin, a lot of the things that are going on in, unfortunately, all communities. It was about 4 years into that when we realized as a community that we needed to expand that and really, as Jack shared, look at 3 different pieces, 3 legs in our community, that we were going to create awareness and we were going to fight. And so we had the drug addiction, we added the human trafficking committee, which I've been fortunate to be able to chair, and there's a group of about 6 of us on that committee that I think are going to just do some wonderful things. And then also mental illness, okay? And what's interesting about those 3 things is a lot of times they're interrelated. A lot of times there's really a lot of connections there. So just some initial thoughts from me, and I will pass it on now. Is that
To Theresa.
To Theresa.
Okay, so my name is Theresa Merriweather. Thank you everyone for being here. As Jack said, that my life took a vital turn back years ago. I was a former parole officer in North Carolina, and I went through some injustice, and I fought the great fight of injustice there. Brought me back to Ohio afterwards. I was in a very vulnerable state. I had a lot of things that happened to me. And I met this man who I fell in love with, and he was actually a pastor. I ended up relocating to another state with him. I got engaged. And I was, as a believer, I was drinking the milk but not eating the meat, all right? Because now I know that with a man of God, you're not gonna cohabitate together until marriage. So I got there. When I got to that other state, everything changed. I started going through the psychological abuse by him. He couldn't deal with me physically because as a former parole officer, I'm trained, all right? But it was the psychological that he got to me. Back in my childhood, I dealt with some trauma as well. And so I dealt with the anxiety with PTSD. Before I became a parole officer, I took Xanax. Xanax, we know, is a controlled substance. I took it PRN, per requested need, and it's scored, right? So you can cut it in half. Well, when I became a parole officer, my doctor told me, I'm gonna take you off of the Xanax because if you get in a situation, it's gonna delay your reaction time with your weapon. So I started taking what's called Atarax. It's like an antihistamine. He gave me that. So if I get a little anxious or whatever, my anxiety, because again, I dealt with some childhood trauma and I was affected by mental illness with the anxiety and the PTSD being in. So my trafficker, which was my ex-fiance, he knew that I took the Atarax, okay? And it was in capsule form. When I got there to that location, everything was good, but then things changed very rapidly. He would hide my wallet so I couldn't get to the doctor. I couldn't understand why I was not feeling so well. He was putting the Rufinol, the date rape drug, in my sweet tea. I love sweet tea. So I would make, empty the jugs of, the milk jugs. I empty 2 of them. I put put the letter S on the jug for the sweet, that's me, and then he liked the unsweetened, put the U. And I didn't realize, and he told me, he said, Theresa, because he had a former ex-wife, he said, why don't you, go to bed without clothes on and stuff? He said, my ex-wife wore out of clothes and stuff. He's like, that's a turn off. So I'm like, okay. So I take my shower at night and then sleep in just a towel, naked. And I couldn't understand. He put the date rape drug in my sweet tea, and I remember I just fall out in the bed. And many mornings I wake up with semen in between my breasts and feeling violated in my vaginal area. And so that's where I got the addiction with the drug. The date rape drug, and then he took with the Atarax and took it apart and put it in a capsule with the benzos. So it's like my body was jonesing for that drug and stuff, and I'm thinking like, God, what's going on with me, Then the physical abuse would come, and I remember one time he came up from the side of me, and so my reaction time was a little bit delayed. He threw cold water on me, and when he did, I got up. And I like to, I would say, Jack, fight, right? So I had the delayed reaction, but then I laid him out in the living room on the floor. And when I did, I said, Lord, I just want to kill this man. I want to take his life right now. But I'm an identical twin. And I could just hear the voice of my twin, don't kill him, Theresa, don't do it. And I knew that I wouldn't see my identical twin another day in my life because I would go to prison for it, right? And then he's building already a case on me, like it's domestic violence, all right? Because he said that his prior ex-wife, she abused him and all this other stuff. So I'm like, Lord, what am I gonna do? So anyway, and knowing in that state that I was in, I said, I'm not gonna win, this case, if I take his life or whatever, no one's gonna understand. And so I got these drugs in my system, I'm addicted to it, and I found myself, God help me, why did you allow this to happen to me? But at the end of the day, and I went through all that abuse, and he was Caucasian, right? And he called me the N-word, all that other stuff, but that didn't affect me. I just stayed calm, and I asked God to lead me, to help me, to show me, give me a way out of this. And I was able to get a way out of it and get away from him. And so I've dealt with the shame and the guilt. I just come out in the last 6 months. My psychiatrist had told me, as she treated me and my biblical counselors and stuff, as I went through the withdrawal, she said, Theresa, she said, you need to be journaling. She said, write this stuff down. She says, because God's gonna use you to save lives. Because I wanted to commit suicide. I said, God, I'm done with this life. I dealt with the injustice in North Carolina, but I'm done. Look at what just happened to me. And I just held on to the people who God brought to surround me. And now I look back and I understand why I went through what I went through. It's to be able to help others and save lives. And like I said, in the last 6 months I've come out and I told my psychiatrist back then, she said, Theresa, she said, you need to tell your story one day. And I said, if God will heal me, I said, I will tell my story. And so I was a speaker for an event not too long ago, and the topic was exposing my wounds as I ascend, right? And so I had to, when we look at with the Band-Aid, we put the Band-Aid on with the wound. And so here I am, God, I don't want to take this Band-Aid off. And you know what the doctor says, take the Band-Aid off so it can completely heal. And I said, I just, this shame and guilt, I was a parole officer, academia, I'm really good, I'm a big, good scholar. I said, God, I can't do this. What are people going to think of me? But I went ahead and I exposed my wounds, that I'm a survivor. And I'm grateful to God that he kept me and sustained me, that I didn't take my life. So now I'm in the life of saving lives, all right? So that's my story.
Theresa, thank you so much. We'll get back to a quick question for you, but I just wanted to say, from your own professional experience, you were a law enforcement officer.
Yes.
You had a fiance.
Yes.
That fiance was a pastor who you trusted.
Man of the cloth, yes.
And you became a victim and then a survivor of human trafficking.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that the crowd understands this can happen to anybody and can happen anywhere. Candace.
Well, as Jack introduced me, sorry, my voice is a little hoarse. I'm Candace Williams, and I am the Executive Director of Ruby's Women's Group. We help women coming out of trafficking and addiction, because for me, it started when I was young. I grew up in a family, my mom was in addiction, and with that became a lifestyle. Every man that she was with sexually abused me, so I had this mindset that every man that I had to be with, sex was love. So that's put me in a mindset that that's where I had to be. I can remember my mom always going back to these men. Even after she knew what they were doing to me, she would go back to them. And I found out later, that is a part of exploiting, for my mom to get what she wanted out of life, how to fill her voids. But it took a long time for me to, like Theresa was sharing, it took a long time for me to come out and speak about this, because I fought my whole life to not use drugs until I was 20. I started drinking, and literally within a week I was using methamphetamines, because that's how fast the addiction just ramped in my life. I used in Arizona. I started dating dope boys, and next thing you know, I was being trafficked. Next thing you know, I was sleeping with doctors and nurses and lawyers and, really high-end individuals. But if I didn't, it started off with, it was their friends. oh, sleep with my friend, I'll give you a little extra meth. Sleep with my friend or else this. And then sooner or later it turned into, if you don't do this, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. So it was a mental thing. So for me, that went on for 5 years. I would go back and forth. I was addicted to the lifestyle. A lot of people don't talk about that, being addicted to the lifestyle. I wanted to fill a void in my life, and that's the void that I used. I used that to fill that void. I ended up going across country with a sex offender with my daughter in 2009, and I got arrested. But I remember the day before I got arrested, that night before I got arrested, I said, God, I don't even know if you exist, but either you take me right now or something has to change, because I was at a point in my life where I wanted to die. I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to deal with the trauma anymore. I didn't want my daughter to have to go through anything that I ever went through. And I woke up the next morning with SWAT surrounding us and with guns pulled to my head, but I had this overwhelming peace. I knew then that my life had changed and that I never had to go back there again. I was in a 4x9 cell, and it was just me and a Bible because I had a high-profile case. And the first scripture that I ever read was Romans 8:28, and it says, "For all things will be used for the glory of God for those who love him according to, that are called to his purpose." So I knew from that point forward, everything in my life that I had went through was going to be used for his purpose. He began to show me that I would be going back into Egypt. He began to show me that I would be going back into that territory and bringing women back out so that they could find their worth, because that's when my life really changed, is when I began to find my worth. When I began to fill that void instead of with sex, I began to realize who I was, that I was worthy, that I had no longer had to fill it with the trauma, and so I began to heal. But again, like I said, it took many years for me to actually come out and speak about these things. It was probably maybe 4 years ago I began to really speak on these things. I started Rubies in 2016. It started as a support group for women. And in 2017, I began to house women. But I really focused on women that were coming out of addiction. And as the women were coming in, I realized, oh my gosh, I am no different than these women. And when I tell you that 99% of the women that came through Rubies was sexually abused, and later on professed and claimed, their trauma of being trafficked as well, it made me realize I was no different. As I had someone very important in my life speak into my life and tell me that when I began to heal, that the Lord would use my past for that purpose. And I didn't understand them at the moment, because in my mind I was just like, I was just sexually abused, that's it. But it went deeper than that, because like I shared, when you go out on the streets, it's about perspective. A lot of times people think that, when I tell my story, they're like, oh, you were just an escort. I was not just an escort. I was not just a prostitute. There was someone behind me that was feeding that. There was someone behind me that gave fear. So the perspective of it, when there's someone, a woman or a male, because it's very prominent that males are out there now, a male or a female is out there on the street corner, they're not out there 99% of the time because they want to be. And I'm telling you that from my own experiences. So the next time when you're walking down the street and someone doesn't look like you, smell like you, and they're out there prostituting or being forced to prostitute, keep that in mind, that they're someone's daughter, they're someone's mother, they're someone's sister. And that brings me to a couple months ago, I had a really close friend. She was struggling. She had been clean for 2 years, and she had went back out. Well, she went back out, and she was going to church with me. She was calling me almost every single day, and I hadn't heard from her. And then her sister contacted me, because I was also friends with her sister. She's like, we haven't heard from her in like 3 days, and have you heard from her? And I said, no, I haven't. I said, well, did you put out a missing persons report? They put out the missing persons report, and literally the police station told her she's probably out on a bench. No regard to that she probably really is missing. Fast forward a couple days later, the last place that she was seen, there was a foul odor reported to the police station, and they sent one officer out to find this foul odor, and they only searched for 20 minutes. That Saturday, we had put together a community search, and me and her sister are the ones who found her deceased body because she was murdered. Now, she was someone's sister, she was someone's friend, and if it would have been taken into consideration that she was more than just an addict and she was more than just a prostitute, she may have been found sooner than that, and now we don't know if her murderer is ever going to be found because her body was so deceased. So with that being said, I just want to bring light to perception. The word that I have for you today is perception. Change your perception, take off those rose-colored glasses, and change your perception on how you look at individuals.
Candace? Two things I want to bring up. One of them that you said, because you talked about perception. You were forced to have sex. These were doctors, attorneys, etc. This wasn't some street encounter or anything else that you had, but you were set up to do this. Number two is, and I want to just touch briefly on it now, and then we can go into it later if you would like to tell everybody. I had the opportunity to go down and meet Candace with the organization that she runs in Mansfield. And the organization that you run is an initial entry point, an initial step for survivors of human trafficking. There was a particular story that you shared with us that day that was going on about a survivor who had been missing for quite some time. Can you explain that to everybody?
I think that you may be talking about Marlene with a case from Katrina, maybe. But I do have kind of a similar story. I had an individual that had been missing for quite some time. And the Harriet Tubman movement, I don't know if you guys are aware of that organization or not, but they are very known in like the Lima area. And they help individuals coming out of trafficking. They're that really initial point, like building the trust, a lot of street ministry, things like that. And they had called me, and they had this young girl that had been trafficked all over. Her family had been looking for her, and they finally found her. Well, she ended up coming to Ruby's, and I can remember when she came to Ruby's, she slept in the closet. For the first 2 months that she was there, she slept on the floor because that's where she felt safe. And we had a function that we were going to, and she literally sat under the table because she did not want to be around anyone. She wanted her hair cut because that was one thing that got commented on all the time, was that her hair was beautiful. So her traffickers and the Johns would comment on her hair all the time. So the trauma of that, she wanted to cut her hair really short. I will say today she has her own apartment and she is doing good, but it took a lot, and not just from Ruby's, but she had to go to somewhere else where she could get deeper trauma counseling and stuff than what we can offer at Ruby's. So yeah, that was.
But Candace, it's a valuable first step, and I applaud you for everything that you do because you've dedicated your entire life to this. Samantha.
Hi, so I don't do story-centered leadership, but I was an adult victim of human trafficking. I was a social worker, single parent, and I lost my job and my car kind of just died within like a week of each other. So I was staying with family and friends, I was looking for work, and I was recruited to apply for a position, and ended up being trafficked by a criminal syndicate for 4 months. And during that time, I was trafficked in 11 states and 25 cities. And had the good fortune, I had some friends and even some clients who helped me run and helped me hide until I could connect to help. But even with that, one of my children, my son, was getting ready to turn 12, and so there was not a single shelter in the entire U.S. that would take me with both of my children being able to stay with me. The closest we came was one shelter that said when he turned 12, he would have to go in the men's shelter. Domestic violence shelters wouldn't take me because they only covered intimate partner violence. And so I actually ended up having to work in the adult industry for another 1.5 years so I could save up money until I was able to exit.
Thank you, Samantha. That's one of the things that we want to look at too, and I know Dr. Carson's going to speak on it, but especially in the Cleveland area in Lorain County, we have very little support for survivors and victims of human trafficking, appropriate housing, appropriate services. And this is one of the things today that I hope we leave here with the thought of what else can we do to help build the community, to help survivors of of human trafficking, and to provide those victims the appropriate services, which we severely lack in this county. And so, Samantha, thank you very much for that and bringing that to light. And Dr. Carson, I know that you can speak to that as well, but a little bit about your foundation and story today.
That was a good segue. And when I started this work in 2008, I live in Columbus, Ohio, and there were 88 beds in the country specifically for victims of sex trafficking. 88 beds. In Columbus, Ohio, there are over 800 beds for dogs. There's the pet palace, the pampering palace. I can go on and on and on with the palaces. And I have nothing against animals, but the reality of it is I think our perspective needs to be changed. And I also think that we should be a priority. People should be a priority. So I'm going to ask you a question as I share my story. I just want you to think about this question. What if you can do what you love to fight what you hate? These stories are real, and I'm hoping that by the end of this session, you will absolutely hate what you hear, and you will want to do something about it. So my story started way before I was trafficked. I have a grandmother that she was about this wide, and she used to put herself in a closet that was this wide. So that was funny to start with, okay? My grandmother would put herself in this closet, and she would go in the closet and she would say, now look, I'm about 8 years old during this time. And she would say, Jesus, this is Moselle. Now, first of all, I'm laughing because my grandmother's on first name basis with Jesus. Now, I don't know anything about that life yet. And she would say, when the Lord turns again the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dreamed a dream. And she would go on with the scripture. For those who want to know, it's Psalms 126. And then, howbeit at 13 years old, I am being groomed to be trafficked. Now, we don't even know the word trafficking because it doesn't exist at that time. And so trafficking doesn't come around until 2000, the term trafficking doesn't come to 2000. And so at 13 years old, this couple moved into our neighborhood. And when they moved into our neighborhood, they groomed our entire neighborhood. They began to go to the school. They had no kids. They became chaperones at the school. They played cards. You know, I'm kind of old, so they went to like bid whist parties. Y'all know what that is? Somebody said yes. Who said, let me see your hand. You know what that is? He old too. So they would do all these games and stuff, and so the community would come together. That's my point. They would come together, and so this family, this couple, totally got indoctrinated with our community. So now I'm 13 years old, and they ask your mom, can you go to the zoo? Well, the zoo is only 45 minutes from our house, you know, no big deal. You can go to the zoo. And it was me and 3 other girls, my friends. We were road dogs. And so about 3 months later, they would say, ask your mom, can you go to Kings Island? Well, you know, Columbus to Kings Island, it's not that far. It's like in Cincinnati. So no big deal. You can go to Kings Island. Then they would say, ask your mom, can you go to Cedar Point? Do you all see what's happening? What's happening? We're getting further and further away. So then they said, now, at the time, I'm modeling, and my parents are from West Virginia. Anybody here from West Virginia? I'm not going to hold it against you. But my parents are from Beckley and Bluefield, West Virginia. They wouldn't know what a pimp was if it said P-I-M-P. They would have to look it up in the dictionary. They just did. That's not where we're from. That's not our culture. And so when I turned 15, they said, ask your mom, can you go to New York City? Now look, I'm modeling, and it's every model's dream to go to New York City. I know nothing about grooming. I'm 15. They know nothing about grooming or this whole process. And so I go, and I'm excited. Mom, can I go to New York? All my friends are going. She said, heck no, and she didn't say heck. And I'm like sad. I come out the door. I'm like, I can't go, y'all. But this man was so strategic. So this is why I'm telling you all this. He said, ask your mom when she's on the phone. Do y'all know what that means? Ask when she's distracted. But I'm 15. I don't know anything about a mom being distracted. I don't know anything about that. But my mom wasn't that slow. She still wasn't going for it. And so I lived in a community that still jumped double dutch. I told you I was old. We jumped double dutch outside. We played outside. We didn't have all these Xbox games and all this kind of stuff. And so one day we were outside, and their house was 2 doors down from ours, and they had a sun porch on the front. And so we were outside jumping double dutch. The man and his wife were on the porch, and my aunt pulled up. My aunt pulled up, and her car had been hit. You can physically see she was hurt. And so he says, Marlene, go ask your mom right now. And I run in the house. But by the time I get in the house, my aunt is standing behind me with a black eye, messed up face. And I'm like, Mom, please, can I go? And she just said, yeah, get on out of here. Yeah, you can go. I had my yes. And I didn't even care, you know. I didn't care. So we go, it's Labor Day weekend. We go to New York City. All of us are in the van. It's 4 girls, 4 teenage girls, and a husband and a wife. And we sing church songs all the way to New York. How you do that? You're ready to traffic somebody. But we did. We sung church songs, and we had a contest. Who would know the oldest church song? And of course, my mother and my parents were sanctified, Holy Spirit, rolling on the floor kind of people. So of course I knew the oldest gospel songs. When we get to New York City and we go to Canal Street, how many been to Canal Street before? How many been to New York before? You have? You bought some of them fake purses? I know, just kidding. I already know. I know how we do when we go to New York, I know. So we go there and they tell us to come back at 8 o'clock because we're going to a Broadway show. And by the time we actually get back, we go in the hotel and there's these clothes all around the room. They gave me a blue lace dress, lace, see-through, with pasties and the thong. And I'm 15, and I'm in New York, and we don't have cell phones. And I don't even understand what's happening to my life right now. Oh, did I tell you I was a virgin girl? Yeah. That weekend I was sold 27 times. That weekend. So we come back, and I'm gonna fast forward. So about 2010, I was teaching at a school, professional development day for a school, and I noticed there was someone much older in the audience. So I shared my story, much like I did with you, and afterwards, this lady comes up and she says, what's your mother's name? And I tell her, I don't even know where we're going with this line of questioning. She said, where do you live? Where did you live? And I told her where we live. And she said, is your brother's name Melvin? Now I know she knows me. Now I know, okay, you're asking me these questions for a reason. And she takes me by the hand and she says, I'm so sorry. Well, after you hear a story like that, it's not unusual for people to feel it, you know, like, I'm very sorry what you went through. So I said, it's okay. And she's crying. And I'm like, ma'am, it's really okay. I believe God, he orders my steps, and this is the route I had to take, and it's going to be used for a purpose. And she says, I'm sorry because I saw them kidnap you and I did nothing about it. Right. See, my house was right on the side, across the street from our school. When the parking lot, say the parking lot is right there, there's a music room right here, and the music room was full of windows. She was the music teacher. And so that weekend I was in New York. They actually brought me back to Columbus and threatened that we better not tell anybody. Of course we didn't. And 2 weeks later, I'm going to school. I cross the street into the parking lot, and I see his car, the trafficker's car, pull up. And I begin to run. He tells me to get in the car, and I'm running. And his brother snatches me, and they kept me and trafficked me for 8 months around the country. And actually, it wasn't just me. It was about 15 girls, and probably 10 or 12 boys. I can't even remember, to be honest. And that was the most horrific time that I've ever had in my entire life. And so I asked you a question, what if you could do what you love to fight what you hate? Everybody in this room has something they can do to abolish sex trafficking, everybody. This seems like it can be overwhelming, but whatever your passions are, in your city, there's a need for resources. And no, I'm not saying you have to have millions of dollars. I'm not saying that you have to be a traffic victim, because a lot of people feel like I can't work with traffic victims because I don't understand their story. That didn't happen to me. Well, everyone in here has a story. Trust me. Everybody in here has some type of story. But what your heart is passionate about. I was thinking about Jack and Theresa and the work that you all are doing. And I sit on the U.S. Advisory Council. I work with the White House, and I've been there for about 1.5 years. I see the gaps in services. But when I come to communities like this, Jack, it literally breaks my heart to see that there's no housing for a victim of sex trafficking, that there's no drop-in center for a victim of sex trafficking. I've actually worked with law enforcement that tells me things like, we don't want to rescue victims because where are we going to take them? And so they just leave them in the trafficking situation. I'm going to tell you this last story, and then I'm going to leave this stage. Oh, I'm going to go sit down. I'm not going to leave the stage. So I can remember when I was in that lifestyle, I had a green robe, and I used to sit in the corner, and I would put that green robe over my head, and I would beg God, send somebody to get me. I didn't care if it was the police. I didn't care if it was my mother. I didn't care if it was my frenemy, whoever that could have been. I just wanted out of that situation. And guess what? Nobody came, y'all. Nobody came. So when the trafficker tells you things like, nobody cares about you, nobody's looking for you, you start to believe that stuff. But I know there's people out here, people in this audience that care about victims of sex trafficking, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't. So I don't care what your talent is, what your skill set is. I guarantee you it can be used to help someone else. Last piece of this. I did an event much like this one, and there was 2 people there that I knew, our attorneys and a graphic designer. Our attorney at the time, Jack, that law firm charged us $450 an hour to do anything legal for us. $450 an hour, that's a lot of money. But after they heard me speak, they called me a couple days later and said, we're going to start charging you a tithe for our services. So they took it down to $45 an hour. They used what they had. They used what they did to help us. So they used what they loved to fight what they hated. Same thing with the graphic designer. I don't know if you guys do anything graphically, or if you have a need to like brochures and things like that. That stuff is not cheap. So if there's a graphic designer in the audience, get with Theresa and Jack, because I guarantee you they can use your services. My point is, what if you can do what you love to fight what you hate? All of us can do something to help abolish sex trafficking. I'm Dr. Marlene Carson. Thank you so much.
Dr. Carson, you talk about being trafficked for 8 months, one of the worst 8 months of your life. Candace had told a story about a young lady who came into her life that slept in the closet, had to have her hair cut, being under a table because she didn't want to be out anywhere. I think you also had a story of a remarkable survivor that had gone missing in a tropical storm many years ago that came to your attention.
I have so many of those stories. I'm not even sure which one you're talking about, but I can tell you one of the stories from the recent hurricanes that happened. So sometimes when we have natural disasters like that, traffickers use it as a prime time to go get victims. I mean, it's prime, because you have so many people that are displaced. They may not know where their parents are. It's horrible, to be quite honest. So the one story that's coming to my mind, there was a couple that actually went to New Orleans. This couple had almost 26 kids in a van, literally. Can you, first of all, how did that many kids fit in the van? But they did. They had all these kids. We work with Homeland Security a lot, and the reality of it was those kids had been traumatized severely. But guess what? They didn't have nowhere to take them either. So you know where they end up going? To a foster care. Do you know what happens in foster cares? Do you think those kids end up staying? Most of them, we don't even know where they are today. But there are some powerful stories. Can I segue to her 1 second?
Absolutely.
So there are some powerful stories you're going to hear. This young lady was sitting beside me. Her name is Rosita Curry. We have an organization called Rahab's Hideaway in Columbus, Ohio. We started that in 2008, and it is a housing organization. She was one of our first clients. I'm not going to tell your story. But you're talking about resilience, and you're talking about a woman that when they had the right resources, when she had services, people asked me questions like, what was your success with Rosita? I didn't have no success with Rosita. Rosita did the work. All we did was provided the opportunity. If she had to, I'm gonna tell this one little bit, okay? So Rosita, when she first came, the caseworkers, people that actually helped rescue her, which I hate that word rescue, but that's a whole nother story, but that helped to facilitate her freedom, they told me not to invest in her because she was a throwaway. Did you know there's a government term that it doesn't exist anymore because a lot of us lobbied to get rid of the term, but it was a government term called a throwaway. And so when I met her though, I said, this girl is not a throwaway. She'll tell you her story. But 14 months later, she calls me. She calls me on the phone. And she's crying, and she's like, I'm in trouble. I'm like, she was always doing something, y'all. I ain't gonna tell y'all that part either. But she was always doing something. I said, what did you do? What's wrong? I'm valedictorian. I'm like, what? Girl, do you know how great that is? She didn't even know what valedictorian meant. But she did the work. She's a child victim of sex trafficking since she was 13 years old. I'll let her share her own story. But this is a perfect picture of resiliency. Rosita, to me, is a picture of when a community comes together, because I can tell you, we did Rahab's Hideaway, but we had 1,600 volunteers. So it just wasn't a Marlene show. This was a community effort, and that's what it's going to take for you all to bring some changes in your communities. It's going to take everybody, and it's going to take boots on the ground. And it's going to take some money, too. Some people are going to have to write some checks. That's just the reality of it. That's just the reality of it. It's not, it's not the welfare system. But I'm going to let Rosita tell her story.
Hi, my name is Rosita Curry. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. When I was 5 years old, my mother passed away from breast cancer. When I was 10 years old, my father died from lung cancer. After my father passed away, I was sent to live with my oldest brother, my father's son, from about 9 to 12 years old. During the time that I was living with him, I was physically abused by my sister-in-law and molested by my brother and my nephews as well. About when I was 12 years old, I went to a foster home and experienced my foster father trying to have sex with me as well. So I ran away, and when I ran away, I ran into a pimp. He didn't try to traffic me right off the bat. He told me that he could help me make some money, and I asked him what did I have to do. So he told me that if I sold dogs or if I sold drugs, that I would be able to make money and survive and get what I need every day. And the dogs and the drugs didn't work out, so I ended up prostituting and selling my body at 13 years old. I come from a family of addiction as well, so back when I was like 11 years old, I took my first sip of Parmesan, so I was already addicted to drugs and alcohol. When I was 19, I caught my first soliciting ticket for prostituting. I thought that I was getting in the car with a job, but I got in the car with an undercover police officer. Before that, I was a ward of the state, so I've been in 16 different foster homes, 3 lockdown facilities, and I did 17 months in Scioto Juvenile Corrections. When I got caught when I was 19 years old, I still had a juvenile case because Children's Services didn't want to let me go. So when I got arrested for the soliciting ticket, they took me to juvenile detention, and then they were told to take me to the adult county jail in Columbus, Jackson Pike. So they took me to Jackson Pike. That was my first time going to adult jail, and that is where I met Dr. Carson. She came to see me, she talked to me, she asked me if I wanted help. I said yeah. I went to her program. I stayed clean for about 2.5 years, got my nurse aide license from Columbus State Community College, graduated valedictorian, and today I could celebrate 8 months clean and serene. And that's all I got.
Rosita, I think I have a question to ask that I know the answer to, but I'm not sure. This is the first time that you've addressed publicly your situation?
No, this is not my first time speaking.
Okay, but we met for the first time at my house last night. Your story was very compelling, and I'm glad that you came up here on stage today and took this opportunity. And thank you for the perseverance that you've exhibited, and to show everybody here that there's always a success story that can be had, as Dr. Carson said, when the community comes together to do this.
Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you very much. Dr. Davis, out of talking and hearing everybody that has been up on the stage today and your background in regards to psychology, what is the effect of what you see when survivors of human trafficking come before you, the specializations that you have in those treatments, and what can you tell the audience today of the endurance that those patients of yours have to go through in order to be the success stories that we would like them to be?
If you only think there's one avenue to success and, people helping you become free of this lifestyle, you're wrong. The problem is most of the people that come forward, they're met with so much adversity because people either don't believe their stories, or the people that are coming forward, they don't have any basis of trust to trust someone that they're talking to. If you have someone that walks into a police station or is brought into a police station on a drug charge, and you just look at them as someone who's an addict or a prostitute, and you don't take the time to really kind of figure out what's going on behind the scenes, and you don't take the time to get them in front of the right people that can figure that out, it's almost a lost cause right there. And then they just feel, rejected again. I mean, one of the things that Theresa is really passionate about, and I'm sure everyone else on this panel is too, is making sure that education gets out there. It's not just about educating our law enforcement officers or our teachers. It's about educating, our foster homes. It's about educating our clergy members. It's about educating our community members. It's about educating our hair salons. Like any place that someone could walk into or be brought into, that's where the education needs to start.
I absolutely agree, and I hope it's starting here today as well. I've been in law enforcement for 3 decades now. My wife, who is also sitting in the front row, she joins me at 30 years in law enforcement as well. And when we look at these situations that we can bring the community together, and I know there's been a lot of talk over the course of the last year in regards to criminal justice and law enforcement reform. I am actually on the committee with the state in regards to establishing the training patterns and the curriculum of what Ohio law enforcement will be engaged in over the course of the next several years. Talked about training. You talked about cosmetologists. I want to go on the record with everybody here that as a 30-year veteran of law enforcement, the last time I had any training that was mandated by the state of Ohio in human trafficking was 2016. The Ohio Peace Officers Training Commission stated that all police officers in the state of Ohio had to have, ready for this, 1 hour. 1 hour of human trafficking training. You've heard stories today in regards to looking beyond the drug trafficking case, looking beyond the missing juvenile, looking beyond helping. And a lot of times you'll hear colleagues of mine say, but Chief, we don't have time to do this. Chief, we don't have the resources to do this. Dr. Carson also talked about that this makes her sad coming to Lorain County as she looks at the resources that we have available to us and they're minimal to none that we have. And we have to look at the ability to not only investigate human trafficking cases, in which Tim's group is doing a great job of in Summit County and Greene, and being able to take task force resources and not only say it's just the drug task force, but now it's the major crime task force. It's a three-legged approach to how we're going to combat human trafficking and other social issues which are going on inside of our communities. We have to look at spreading those resources out. I look at this panel here today when we decided that we wanted to do this a couple months ago. Theresa Merriweather came to me and she said, what can we do to reach out to the community? And I said, we can take the campaign and use the resources of the campaign to put these type of meetings together, community engagements together. And I said, however, Theresa, I said, it can't just be you and me. I said, who can we get together to come up and create a panel? And Theresa laughed and she said, oh, I'll make a couple phone calls. I will have your panel for you to come here. Theresa then started giving me information, biographies of everybody who wanted to be involved. And as I read their biographies, the advanced educational degrees, the years of experience, the social movements that they've been on, the passion, which is in this committee, I said this is the perfect group of people to come to Lorain County, to be able to have a conversation and say, we need to move you to do something. And as Dr. Carson said too, somebody's got to write a check, if it's going to come from the government, if it's going to come from social service organizations, but each and every single person up here represents a different organization that has resources, a different organization that can bring a different specialty to come to this. Then from the law enforcement perspective, we look at training, 1 hour in 2016. My particular department that I'm the chief of police of, we make human trafficking training a priority because our officers need to know this and they need to be able to educate the community. And this is what we would like to do on a continual basis as well. And Theresa, do you have something on training that you wanted to say? Or?
Yeah, that Chief Hall is getting ready to go through my training, so him and his officers. Yeah, so he's going to be trained by me. Yeah, so I'm getting ready to get that pre-assessment ready. He's probably going to fail, but hopefully after he undergoes, he's going to pass.
Actually, another question I had, we talked about the law enforcement training.
Yeah.
I know one that you dealt with, and then when Governor Kasich was governor, cosmetologist in the state of Ohio. Theresa, can you have more training than we do as police officers?
Yeah. So back in 2016, Governor Kasich, underneath his tenure, he mandated that all licensed cosmetologists in the state of Ohio they were required to take 1 continuing education hour in human trafficking awareness in order to renew or obtain their license for cosmetology. So I was one of the people that I went to a lot of hair salons throughout the state of Ohio. I go in, build their safety profile, so that if in the event that a trafficker comes in with the new recruits during a lot of times the transformation process with human trafficking, that they knew how to separate the trafficker from the victim and get them to safety without compromising the security and safety of that whole entire establishment and the victims. So I've trained a lot of cosmetologists. One of the problems that I saw, and I've seen, is the fact that some of the cosmetologists would say, "Oh, we're going to take the course online. That's for free." And a couple of them say, "I already gave my coworkers their the answer key or whatever, so we're going to go ahead and pass it. Don't worry about us." I had a problem with that because that's someone's child, that's someone's loved one that could come through that hair salon, and by you going ahead and cheating and not knowing what you're doing, you right there were unable to save a life. And I actually, since we're right here where we're placed at, the cosmetology salon right down the street is actually a cosmetology school. I went in there, and the only person that knew that I was coming through was the owner. And I did an actual simulation. I brought through one of my staff. She played the role as a new recruit, and I played the trafficker. Came in during the transformation process, and they didn't pick up on me right here at this school. So then after they didn't pick up on me, then I went ahead and trained them the following week, and everyone passed on how to recognize a trafficking victim that comes through the hair salon with their traffickers.
Give us an idea of the scope of the training that you provide through your prevention program that the general public takes. So I feel
So can you tell me a little bit more? What's your question? The context?
Could you please give us an idea of the scope of the training that the general public can receive through you, through your prevention training program that a few of us have taken? Give us an idea of what we can expect when we take your training, the role playing, and I think we took a test even.
Okay, so what you're going to do first is I can do in-person training, bringing in my staff, and I also have children, youth ages 11 and up that is on. And you're going to come through. When you come through the training, I'm going to put you actually in the situation of human trafficking. Just like in law enforcement, our experience is actual putting you in the situation. It's called situational awareness. You're not going to see me sitting at a PowerPoint presentation, giving any type of PowerPoint. No, I'm putting you in the situation with human trafficking. First thing you'll see me coming through with the first simulation will be the real estate agent. I play the real estate agent, and then, I play the trafficker, and I have a woman or a male that's actual real estate agent right there that they're facing me, and I'm trying to purchase a house for trafficking. All right? Another one that you're going to see is the hair salon one. When they're a lot of times in transit, in movement, they get their hair transformed. So I'm going to show you what it looks like when they come through the hair salon, what to pick up on. A lot of these kids, I'm not telling you not to purchase the PS4 games, but a lot of these kids on these PS4 games, right there, they're at risk, because at any given time, there's over 50,000 pedophiles playing those games, and also on social media and stuff. They're not playing for the sake of playing. They're playing for the sake of separating those kids from their parents, all right? I show you what it looks like with a social worker. She's faced with a juvenile that is having a hard time at school. Her grades have plummeted and stuff, and she's in love with her trafficker, which is her boyfriend. So there was a case out pre-COVID in Houston, Texas. If you Google on your website, Houston teen commits suicide after being trafficked. That young lady was in love with her trafficker, that youth. And so she committed suicide. She couldn't be with the trafficker. I also show you what it looks like with a juvenile delinquent that keeps coming on and off of probation, all right, that's involved with trafficking. I have an identical twin sister, Tilly. I have the braces, she doesn't. She was a juvenile probation officer. She was a juvenile probation officer in Cuyahoga County for over 10 years. Now she works with Job Corps. But during her tenure with the Juvenile Domestic Relations Court in Cleveland, she had a lot of heavy hitters, a lot of the kids that are in gangs and stuff, like the heartless felons and stuff. My training allowed her to be able to pick up on a young lady who was involved in a sex trafficking operation. My twin sister would lock her up, get her locked up. She'd go in a detention home. She's recruiting new girls. So she was able to get to safety in the other ones that was involved with trafficking. So I put you in the situation of human trafficking. You're not going to get bored, and it's going to go really, really fast. And you have a pre-assessment you have to take before. So I assess your knowledge with human trafficking. Then you go through the training, and then you take a post-assessment, and then I give you a training evaluation form that I'm able to measure the success or measure the effectiveness of my training. So, yep, and I certify you because I have the pre and the post-assessment, and you have your training evaluation. If there's anyone in here that has like organizations, I know like Leadership Lorain County, I know one of the directors is in the audience. Like if you're going after the grant, right? They're going to measure. They're going to be looking for. We give you this grant money. They're going to measure the effectiveness. You're able to provide this information to them that this is how effective my training program is. So, and I provide you that information after everybody's gone through the training programs. I'll hand you the pre-assessment, all the scores, post-assessments, and then the training evaluations. All right? Does that answer your question? All right.
And I think, did somebody else, Dr. Carson, you wanted to speak to that as well? Or?
Yeah, last month we had a case in Columbus, Ohio. I received a call from a beautician, and she said someone had called their salon and said it was someone that had a heavy accent, and they said, I want to make an appointment, and I want you to make my brother look like a girl. And so, of course, they called, and we got law enforcement involved, and 3 people were rescued as a result of them having the training. But I can tell you it wasn't that 1-hour training that was online. The people that actually went through, we have something called the Certified Courage Coaching Program, and it's a 40-hour training. They knew what to do, and they knew who to call. And I was just thinking that we should give you all some resources. So if everybody just take a few minutes and take out your cell phone. I'm going to give you a phone number.
And also, if you don't have a cell phone, this will all be available on our website after today's presentation, too, at hallforsheriff.com. So all the presentation information, photographs, videos, et cetera, will all be made available, as well as the contact information.
Perfect. The number I'm going to give you is the number to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The National Human Trafficking Hotline. And that number is 888-373-7888. And I'll repeat it again. That number is 888-373-7888. I also wanted to say that we did bring books and products that are made by survivors of sex trafficking, but the book that I brought, it is a true story of a victim out of Sandusky, Ohio, who was trafficked by the safety and security officer at 14 years old at her school. True story.
Before I ask some questions of the audience, one of them that I had is that, and whoever wants to address it, go ahead and address it, but we talked about cosmetologists receiving training. In that same venue, I'm looking at nail techs, lingerie shop owners, cosmetologists who cut hair. Why are those all essential businesses and workers that need training in this type of topic?
Okay, so let's look at basically why they need to be trained, correct?
Exactly.
So the cosmetologist during the transformation process, you're going to transform the hair of the new recruits or the victims so that A, they look better, so that, this is if I'm a trafficker, my merchandise, guess what? It's going to cost more, right?
What do you mean by transformation process, Theresa?
Transformation, like say if I get my hair transformed, I may get some weave that's down to my back, okay? So we're gonna transform this look right here to down to my back, and I may have it colored. Or I look at Jennifer right here, we're gonna do a bob cut and cut her, let's say, a red. So her hair is gonna look different, okay? She's gonna be transformed, she's gonna have a different appearance, all right? And then also she can't be recognized. Yes, correct, the changing of of their identity, yes. Also, I want to go look at how many people, I'm going to say non-native nail salons, right? I've visited them and everything. I'm not just saying just them. They were wearing the mask pre-COVID, all right? I used to go in there all the time, I'm like, dang, how come they won't give me one of those masks? Because I don't want to ingest these fumes. But later on in life, I've recognized and trained to recognize that they're wearing the mask as a disguise those labor trafficking victims that are over here that are doing your nails, all right? So that's another reason why, with nail salons and with the cosmetology, because underneath the cosmetology board, the nail techs come through there in order to get licensed. Another reason why you have to be trained so you can recognize when you go into these nail salons if there's a labor trafficking victim that is doing your nails. And one of the things that I'll be reaching out to ask the governor is if they can put back on in the nail salon establishment, they could put back on the licensure, the picture, and the license number of all the nail techs that are servicing the clients. Because one thing that I'm looking for is you walk in there. If I have the cosmetology license on there, let's say we got 6 of them on the wall, but then I see there's 10 nail techs servicing 10 customers. Right there, they're out of ratio. So right there's a red flag for me. And then I start right then through my motivational interviewing skills, asking that person who's doing my nails, so how long have you been here? They're going to ask me, they're going to answer, or sometimes they'll say, have you chosen your color? Right then they're deflecting. So there's different things that I'm looking for, and I train people what to look for to know that this may be a possible labor trafficking going on in the nail establishment.
Theresa, I think there was a question down at the end.
Oh, she said she gave sort of what she was going to say. The other thing I wanted to say about the nail salons, we just talked about this yesterday, Theresa, how, so I go to this nail salon, it's multicultural, and I pulled up, and all the text was outside. So I'm like, why y'all outside? I have an appointment. She said, oh, we can't go in yet. I'm like, what you mean? She said, state board in there. I said, okay, so why y'all out here and state board is in there? She said, because I'm not really licensed. I use Maine Wings license, and she in Minnesota, and so I use her license here. I'm like, what? So this girl was actually being labor trafficked, and you would have never told me that in a million years, because it appears that she does it with a smile, and that's not the case at all.
And Joe, I
My
appreciate
daughter's
you.
in that field now, and I found out that buying hours is a thing too. Like people will sell hours, so they have shortcuts to licensing.
I just wanted to share that you don't have to be a professional to get awareness. Like, it's very important for you to be aware of your surroundings and to get some kind of training, because I want to share a story. not this past September, but the last September. I had went to Cedar Point, and it's when the first started with the mask mandates and stuff. And I was in line, and I noticed this young girl in front of me because I'm aware of my surroundings, right? This young girl in front of me, she's not standing with the 3 individuals that she's with, but she's standing not 6 feet. And I'm like, okay, something's not right. It's 90 degrees out. This girl has long sleeve shirts on, long sleeve pants. And so I start interacting with her, and I'm like, are you here by yourself? And she wouldn't make eye contact with me. Then I picked up that she didn't have a cell phone. She's probably 14, 15 years old. She didn't have a cell phone. She didn't have a fanny pack. She didn't have any personal belongings on her. As soon as I start making contact with her and interacting with her, one of the individuals, the older one, was like, get over here. I told you not to be talking to anybody. And I was like, whoa, something's going on. I already felt it in my gut. And I looked at my friend and I said, do you see what's going on? And she said, yeah, I do. And I look around and literally everyone else is on their phones. Nobody else is paying attention. I'm like, does no one else see what's going on? So I'm like, okay, Lord, what do I do? So I call the number that Marlene just gave you on hold. I'm like, okay, I have to do something. I get a hold of Marlene, and she's like, well, let the workers know. So I discreetly let the workers know, and thank God they were trained. Because by the time we got off the ride, we was on the Raptor, they had put us up front and pretended like they couldn't get my seatbelt on so I could explain to them the situation that was going on. By the time we got off of the ride, they had it surrounded. It looked like something out of a movie, for real. They had Coast Guards in the water. They had police officers. This young girl had been being trafficked. She was from Detroit and was kidnapped and was brought to Sandusky, to Cedar Point, to groom other girls to come in. And later on, I don't know if it has any connection or not, but I believe that it probably does. Not even 2 weeks later is when a bunch of traffickers were caught at Kalahari.
You know, there's, here in the U.S., there's actually a cycle that these traffickers generally will try to work, a victim through. And it starts with targeting. So the targeting is to identify someone who has some vulnerability. And my gosh, welcome to the human race. We all have vulnerabilities, right? But you think of, a drug addiction, or you think of homelessness, or you think of someone who maybe isn't a U.S. citizen, and there could be a long list. So there's some vulnerability. And as I talk about these 5 steps, I ask you to think, how could we be better aware at each of these stages to really identify maybe someone who's vulnerable or someone who could be a victim? So they're targeted. After they're targeted, there's an attempt to befriend them, okay? They want to get a little bit closer to them. They're going to be friendly. And so we think about, people that we know, whether it's neighbors, whether it's friends, whether it's children, right? I'm a dad. If there's a kind of a new face that's starting to hang around a little bit, just be aware, right? Who is that person? What's their intent? Okay, the third is then they want to fill a need. They want to fill a need, okay? And maybe that need is, okay, you're homeless. Why don't you come stay with me a little bit? I got an extra room. Or maybe it's drug addiction. And a lot of times, not everybody's addicted to drugs voluntarily, right? Maybe there was something laced, or maybe there was something that, was somehow or another got into this person, right? So maybe it's a soft drug, but there's a need that's filled, okay? And so again, let's just be aware as we think about that, at maybe some sort of a change in somebody's life, or all of a sudden something different's going on. Let's be aware.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. One of the things, especially as parents or aunts, uncles, grandmothers, whatever you may be, that you can be looking for is if there's someone else that comes into your child's life that suddenly, we call it grooming, but is buying them things like new Nikes, new Under Armour, $40, I don't know what you buy, something at the store, $400 sunglasses. Like that's something that should definitely pique your interest and make you wonder, why is this person just suddenly giving my child so many things? And sometimes, a lot of times, it's not an adult. The adults have groomed the children to recruit new people. So it's a child. It might be your child's best friend in their class. So it's just something to look at when something just seems like, it's a little off, but I don't want to pay attention to it because I don't know. Again, it goes back to I don't know what I don't know. It's a good idea to pay attention to it. Yeah.
Thank you. The last two steps, just quickly then, is isolation. And I think of what Theresa was talking about. The gal who's going into the hair salon at that point is being isolated, right? They're going to change her identity. They're going to ship her off, oftentimes to another part of the country. That's isolation. Last is control. And once they have control, they're still, at that point, it's rescue. Okay, it's no longer prevention. Thank you.
Hi. Of course, you know I'm Jo Walker, and I just wanted to share a little bit of my story. I was 12 years old, and I had a paper route, and I wanted another job to make money. So there was this florist, a neighborhood florist in our neighborhood, and I went up through all the businesses on this street. This florist offered me a job to water flowers, clean the shop. Him and his wife and his daughter, his grandchild, they were all there. They ran the shop. So I started working for this florist, and I was so excited because I'm learning about all these different plants and things. I'm making money. One day, it was time for me to go home, and the door was locked. And it was the kind of lock that you couldn't unlock without a key. And I was cornered, and I was forced to do sexual acts. But then, after it was finished, I was given money, and I was allowed to leave. I went home. Normally, a child would tell their parents, but see, my home appeared to be a good home. My father worked for General Electric. He was an aircraft engine specialist. My mother was a registered nurse. My dad was a deacon in the church. My mother was a church secretary. But at home, my father was molesting me. 2 of my brothers were molesting me. My mom used to beat me violently. I never knew why. And so who did I have to tell what happened to me when what was going on was happening to me? So I went on, and my mindset as a 12-year-old little girl, I said, at least somebody gave me money for it. And he was kind to me. So I kept going to work, and I kept being paid. And eventually he started asking me to bring my friends. Well, some of my friends were being abused at home. And I would bring them and say, you know, you want a job? At least you get paid for it. Sometimes we were locked in the basement, and these things would happen, but there was no violence, and we would always be paid. I grew a bond with this man, and guess what? One day, him and his family took me to church, and guess what? He was the pastor. He was the pastor of the church. And this man remained in my life till I was 20-something years old. The sexual things didn't continue because when I was a teenager, one day I snapped, and my brother came after me to have sex with me, and I pulled a butcher knife on him, and I told him I was going to kill him if he touched me. That is when the abuse at home stopped. My brother was sent away, and on top of the sexual abuse, I was being beaten with extension cords, naked, and put in bathtubs and being poured alcohol over. You know, this is how I grew up. But one day I snapped, and my parents got divorced. That is how my abuse ended. But when I got older, I became addicted to drugs. And then I got involved in a cycle of drug abuse and prostitution for 15 years. I finally got out. I'll be celebrating 10 years clean in December of this year. God has been very good to me. In the 10 years that I was clean, I got involved in ministry and served faithfully in a ministry. I got my cosmetology license. I had my own salon for 6 years. I just had to give up my salon because of health problems. That's why when they called me on stage, I was like, no, because I can't sit on these stools. It caused me a lot of pain. But trauma A lot of people don't understand. You know, they say, okay, stuff happens to everybody, get over it. Well, guess what? In August of last year, I started having seizures, really bad, out of nowhere. I was having 3 and 4 seizures a day, sometimes 3 and 4 days a week. And they found fluid on my brain, and they had diagnosed me with intracranial hypertension. But a doctor, a psychologist, and neurologist in the hospital came to me, and they said, honey, have you been through trauma? And I looked at them like, yeah. You know, they kind of caught me off guard. And the neurologist that I had already been introduced to introduced me to the psychologist. And she said, this neurologist reached out to me, and we believe that you have PTSD. And we believe that the seizures that you are having, even though there is something physically wrong with you, we believe that some trauma, that things have triggered it, and it's connected. Well, they were right. Much later, 10 years after I'm off drugs, you know, I'm 53 now. That sexual trauma and thing happened in my childhood, but it came up last year. And I had to get help. When I was young, I never got therapy because my abusers were living with me. They wasn't going to get me any help. And but now I'm getting PTSD therapy and having some other support. You know, sometimes later on in a victim's life, now I call myself what Dr. Carson calls us a survivor, because I have been able to make it past those barriers and being predisposed, you know, and I have still been able to, I'm here, I have a sound mind, my body is being healed, and I can live a quality of life. You know, there is life after trafficking, there is life after sexual abuse, and that is what a lot of these people sitting here, God has called them to do, to help people who have been very broken and who have been splintered and who have been hurt in places that can't be reached with hands and are suffering things that cannot be seen by the eye. For these people to be made whole, to be given services so that they can have a quality of life that they've never had before. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to every last one of you up there. We're accountable because none of us are ignorant anymore. You understand what I'm saying? Everybody around you, you now have the responsibility. I'm telling you, you all of us have now the responsibility to get everybody around us in our circle educated. It goes beyond just us being aware. We now have the responsibility to get everybody else around us aware. I own a company. Every person on my payroll, whether they're working in my office or out in the field, will be taking Ms. Merriweather's training. Some of us already have, okay? If you don't own a company and you work for a company, go to your managers, your supervisors, the CEO if they're available, and tell them the company needs to invest in human trafficking training. You have people on your jobs in the workplaces that are being trafficked off hours. Oh, I can tell you some stories. I was never personally trafficked myself, but I have a young lady who was trafficked. She was involved in a trafficking situation off hours. She'd come to work every day. You think she had, you know, just a normal average person. But off hours, she had a John that had her turning tricks, and this was not what she wanted to do. But he told her he'd kill her if she didn't. Y'all, this is not a game. We're accountable for what we know now.
You have the responsibility. The call has gone forth. Everybody around you, be it someone you know personally or professionally, you have the responsibility to get them involved in trafficking, human trafficking training and awareness. Will you make a pledge to do that? Am I asking too much? Are our survivors asking too much? Let's help them help other people. Awareness is just the first step, and the money's coming. We all know the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the who? You are the righteous. Because you stayed the course in spite of the obstacles. You stayed the course and you did exactly what you were purposed to do. It wasn't an easy thing to do, but I appreciate you. I love you, and I speak a blessing over your life. It's coming, believe me. Theresa knows some stuff, but it's coming. We have more care homes and prevention facilities that will be popping up here in Lorain County. God is strategically placing some people in this county to do exactly what needs to be done, what y'all are asking the state to do. That money's coming down sooner than later.
I think it's a myth. I think it is a myth that needs to be dispelled. It's a myth that we chose it. Do y'all agree? Like, this is something that we wanted. And I can tell you that no little girl gets up and say, I can't wait to get grown to become a hoe. And you know, y'all don't understand that language, that's just real talk, okay? And so nobody does that. Nobody wants to be raped repeatedly every single day, because that's what this is, it's rape. It's not consensual. And then when you think about it, children cannot consent to sex. Most of us were child victims, domestic minor sex traffic victims. And so no child can consent to sex. I think that myth needs to be dispelled, and people need to understand this is a civil rights issue, that this is injustice. And this is something that will not stop until, look, I have to say this, and I'm just going to say it. We got to hold men accountable. If it were not for men, we would not have a problem. Men are 97% of the buyers. And so we need people like you, people of integrity, people of character, that will hold men accountable and not be a part of the good old boys club, and not be a part of, let's watch this porn flick, or let's play Grand Theft Auto where they kill prostitutes and they get more money for the more gruesome they kill a prostitute on a video game. This stuff is real, and all it's doing is numbing your senses to go do it for real and not just on a video game. So, I'm done.
And there's been a lot of talk about sex trafficking, but if you really want to combat trafficking, we have to quit supporting all human trafficking. We are a country through systemic racism that was built on the exploitation of people. Our economy has never survived without the exploitation of people. If you own a cell phone, it probably was made by Chinese slave labor. If you drink coffee, if you have gold jewelry. And the mentality of all human trafficking is that some people are expendable, and some people's rights don't matter as much as other people's rights. So until we get rid of systemic racism, until we reform the foster care system, until we reform the police, until we end mass incarceration, there are many prisoners being labor trafficked as we speak. We have 8 states in our country where prisoners are not allowed to be paid. Most states cap payment anywhere from 86 cents to $1 something. And we have Victoria's Secrets, we have computer companies, we have Aramex, and they would not survive without exploited prison labor. And so until we decide that we're not going to be that kind of country, it's really hard to focus on one part of human trafficking when we spend money on and massively support labor trafficking at the same time.
Okay, I'm gonna say one more thing, and I promise I'm gonna be quiet. So just because of what you said, it just triggered the thought. I know federally, everybody in here is actually a victim of trafficking. Everybody. Do you realize that if you have a social security number, that your social security number has been used as collateral to China, and that's where we get some of our money from? Do y'all realize that? Yeah. So when you think about it, and I'm not even gonna go that deep today because I can, but the reality of it is there's a lot of things that need to be changed in our country, a lot, especially when it comes to money. But, you know, I heard a saying many, many years ago that goes like this: power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And trust me, it does.
So I was a contract security guard at a hotel and in Cleveland, Ohio, and I witnessed human trafficking going on inside this hotel, and not just this hotel, a couple of hotels that I worked at. I started to realize that the hotels are allowing human traffickers, because some hotel brands, they don't allow any security cameras inside the hotels. Marriott is one of the brands. One time when I was working at this hotel, at Marriott Hotel, you know, there was this human trafficking situation going on. The managers were afraid to address it. The managers and the front desk staff, they kept coming to me saying that, Officer Smith-Taylor, we have this human trafficking going on. We need you to monitor the detectives. I was on it, but I had to be secretly quiet about it, and monitoring the hotel. I saw this man fussing and screaming at this girl, trying in chains. This girl was in chains. She was trying to run out. She was trying to run out the hotel, and the man was trying to catch after her. I had to immediately call the police and call the detective. The police department took 30 minutes to come to the hotel. It is very important to everybody in the community. It is very important when you see something like that. We definitely need to be responsible in calling the police, and be more responsible in calling the hotline. We have to say something, because those are those people's lives, and it's very important for us to make sure that we are very active in stopping human trafficking. That's all I have to say.
Another question? Absolutely.
Yeah, so I've started training hotel chains and stuff, and you also have to keep in mind that you don't know what a trafficker looks like physically, right? So because you don't know what a trafficker looks like, that person that owns that hotel may be a person that's involved with a sex trafficking operation. So therefore, also another problem that we have is there's a lot of police officers that are not able to, that are trained properly to recognize when that person calls, that hotel chain that's not involved with trafficking, they call and say, hey, I have a concern. There's a lot of times the police officers are not trained to know how to build that case, and with their interviewing that person to know what's really going on, that this is, look beneath the surface, this is his or her trafficker right here, and they're in trouble. So this is a big thing is training the hotels, in which I've already started training them in things, how to recognize with a human trafficking victim. And also, as Chief Hall knows, that I've developed a human trafficking detection tool that is getting ready to be piloted to detect child sex trafficking in minors, and then also adults. It'll be piloted for behavioral healthcare organizations, we'll put it in, and then schools, the juvenile justice system, and the adult justice system, and then also police officers for the detection tool that will be certified to be able to use it. So hopefully it's going to be able to help the state of Ohio. As a content expert on human trafficking for the University of South Florida, I have a PhD candidate that's came through, and I've already reviewed her dissertation and given her the go-ahead to defend that the state of Florida's human trafficking detection tool is not valid and not credible. So therefore, I've already devised a tool that I will go ahead and use. Cleveland State University, the Criminology Research Center will be validating my tool. So we got help on the way.
So there's also a class action suit going against hotels right now in the state of Ohio. So I want to talk to you about that a little more in depth, but If a victim can prove that they were trafficked in a hotel, and I can tell you that Marriott is number one on the list. They have the most victims that have come forth. Right now, we're working with about 1,600 victims of sex trafficking that have been trafficked in our state, and they have hard evidence that they were trafficked in hotels. The other thing I want to tell you, and this is quite unfortunate, but you can't call every police officer. I can probably tell you that some of us on this stage have been arrested, told that if we turn a trick with the police officer, he won't take us to jail. So we don't trust police officers. And I'm not making that across the board statement, because I understand when Rosita actually was arrested that day, she ended up giving the police officer that arrested her an award a year later because he rescued her for real. And so I don't make it a blanket statement, but it's hard to know which ones are and which ones aren't. That's just the reality of it. And so the police officers, corruption is everywhere. I'll just leave it at that. Jack can speak more to that, but call the ones you see. If I was in this county, I'm gonna call him. I'm not calling nobody. I'm just gonna tell you, I'm not calling anybody else. I just wouldn't do it. I just hear too much stuff. So, oh yeah, I'm gonna call Tanya, you are him, you know? Y'all the same. Yeah, I'm called Tanya, but that's the same. But just, I would personally call who I know that I know would do something about it and not take a girl and go try to turn a date with her, their self.
Hi, thanks for being here and sharing your stories with us. My question is twofold. What do we tell our children, our boys and girls, and when do we tell them? What age is appropriate, or is it more of a what they can understand? What do we tell our children to keep them safe, to make them aware, and just, you know, other than the parents just monitoring what goes on in their lives, what can we tell our children to help prevent any type of grooming going forward?
So I'm going to pass the mic, but I want to answer the question first. One of the things that we do with kids, and we do it with kids as young as 6 years old, anyone ever seen Pinocchio?
Yeah, sure.
Do y'all realize what happens in Pinocchio? Think about it. Just take your mind back. Pinocchio is put in a cage, not brought out. He's only brought out to dance. He has to get food. He has to dance in order to get food. Think about Pinocchio. Pinocchio was more than just a liar. Pinocchio was trafficked.
Wow.
Think about Pinocchio. So that's one of the tools that we use to teach children in schools. The other thing is, a lot of people remember the stranger danger curriculums. Sure. Well, there's a ton of different stranger danger curriculums specifically for kids. We're coming out one with, it's called the Red Thread Granny, because that's what my grandchildren call me, because they say I always rescue people. So we have a coloring book that actually talks about prevention of trafficking for a kid, and they can just color the pictures and it tells the story. The biggest thing I tell parents is communicate with your children. And to me, it's not too soon. The youngest victim we've helped was 6 years old. Wow. There is no too soon. If they can comprehend, and these kids are so good on the computer and all that kind of stuff, there's no too soon. Two more things. There's also an app, and it's called, oh my God, I just told you, M-Spy. M-Spy is an app. And that app, you can have it on your child's phone, put it on your phone, and it tells you every text, every website, everywhere your kid goes, it'll show up on your phone. And so I think that's something that's important. And there was, oh yeah, the Coming Home app. The Coming Home app is an app with facial recognition. So God forbid, let's say you do have a kid that's missing, but you have put them in this Coming Home app. Anywhere they go online, it'll show their location, anywhere. And so those are some of the resources that we use as an agency.
Thank you.
So I am going to address your question, but one thing Theresa and I were kind of sidebarring about is one of the things, so I have a human sexuality certification. It took 5 years to get. Ask me how many hours I spent in that human sexuality certification learning about human trafficking. Does anyone want to guess? 0. 0. And the other thing we were talking about is a lot of times when people think about sex trafficking, especially of kids or even of, women, they always think that it's a man. It's not. 43% of traffickers are women. 43%. And that number's just growing. To answer your question. So I come at it from a little bit of a different standpoint because my specialty and my career has been working with children, especially those with sexual abuse. I always say, I'm gonna stand up, this stool is so uncomfortable, y'all. I always tell people, I don't care how young your child is, your child can be 1 year old. It starts with a few things. Number one, from the day that child is in your possession, whether it's through birth, adoption, guardianship, whatever it may be, you need to tell them how wonderful and beautiful they are, how great they are. My husband and I have 8 kids. We have one right now that, I swear, y'all, he's keeping me on my knees. He's preteen, so y'all can understand that. But every time, even when I have to get on him for something, I always follow it up with, but I love you and I'm really proud of you and you are super smart. Because if all you're doing is getting on your children and you're not telling them how amazing they are, if you can't find one good thing about them, someone else will. And they will come right along, and your kids are so hungry for that, they will latch onto that person. And they'll think, just like some of the stories, just like, Joe said, well, at least they paid me for it, at least they were kind. Sometimes kids, and even adults, they've never experienced kindness. The other thing I would say that's very important is, and this makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but you have got to start using proper names for body parts with kids. I can't tell you how many kids I've had in my practice sitting across from me that have been sexually abused for years and have actually told people. They'll say, well, I told my grandmother, I told my teacher, and I say, well, what did you tell them? And they're like, well, I told them that, my uncle was touching my cookie and they, eating my cookie, and they didn't listen because cookie's the name they gave for vagina. So kids are telling people, but people aren't listening because kids don't have the proper terminology. The other thing is, I always say, get involved in your kids' lives. Like we've kind of become the society where we don't know how to discipline our kids. Are we their friends? Are we, how do we do this whole parenting thing? And it's so complex, especially in this day and age. But think about your kids' best friends. Think about your best friends. They know literally everything about your life. Like, I can call my best girlfriend today, and I could call Teresa. Teresa knows everything about my life, because we're friends. If you're gonna be in your kid's life, you need to know everything. Be a helicopter parent. Know where they're going, who they're going with, who they're talking with online, what games they're playing. They want to sit down and play Xbox? Great, sit down and play Xbox with them. See who they're talking. Know where their friends are going. Know their friends' parents. We have kids that are teenagers. We don't let them go to anybody's house unless we have met the parents and hung out with them. They think we're the most embarrassing parents in the world, but we don't care. We know they're safe. So those are the things that I would say that are most important. I'm sure you guys might have some more to add.
Okay, I also want to say that we also cannot just look at, with sex trafficking, us as survivors, right? You also want to look at, and we're doing research on the task force, is how do we prevent the next trafficker, right? What are we looking at for as far as risk factors and stuff for these teenagers becoming our next traffickers, okay? So that's another thing that we're looking at, and it's also looking at the mindset of a trafficker, because I've interviewed 2 traffickers already, and it's a trafficker's resume. What are their mindsets like? So from a psychological standpoint, looking at a lot of them have the narcissistic traits with their personalities and stuff. So we don't want to just look at the victims of human trafficking, right? You want to also look at the mindset of the trafficker, and also with these children. How do we prevent the next trafficker, all right?
And I would also say with kids, body autonomy. No child should ever be forced to hug, kiss anyone, sit in anyone's lap. I don't care if it's your sweet old grandma, I don't care. They should always be asked, and they should have consent in any physical affection.
Can I tell you that's just not kids, because I hate people to hug me? Please ask. That's just not kids. But I wanted to comment on what she said. I want to ask this question to you all. Why do you think the numbers are 43% of women are traffickers? Why do you think that is? And I'm asking you, the audience. Huh? They could be a former victim. What else? Say that one more time. They groom to recruit. That's true. What else? Both of y'all said at the same time. It's a mother figure. Moms are missing. Moms are not present. Moms are dealing with addiction and their own abuses. So these kids are looking for a mother. So for you all that are healthy and integral and people of character, step in the role. Give a pat on the back. Give some cheers to these kids, because this is what's missing. So the number one answer is a mother. What's the number two answer? What do you think that is? Less suspicion is true. Sometimes they're at the bottom, for sure. What else? So there's two things that everyone in this room needs, and victims of trafficking also need it, and that's love and family. They're looking for love and family. And with that, that's why people can thrive. And that's why we on this stage have been able to overcome, because of the love and and I'm gonna tell you, family looks like this. Family don't look like, just my biological family. This right here for me is family. And I have children, grandchildren, love them. They love me. But when you have the nucleus of a family that understands what you've been through, it just brings a more power. It empowers you even the more. So two things we all need, and that's love and family.
I have a question for Jack. In Lorain County, what are the statistics on human trafficking that you've seen in the last 3 decades of your law enforcement?
I have a very sad answer to that. Other than the recent arrest that was publicized by the Lorain County Prosecutor's Office this last weekend, Lorain County is the 9th largest county in the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio is the, I believe, 8th largest state. We're number 4 in human trafficking. We've had 1 arrest in 2013, and then the arrest that was announced by the prosecutor's office last week. I have a hard time believing, and you asked in the 30 years of my law enforcement, the first time I was ever trained in human trafficking was in 2016. That's the first time I was ever trained in it. And you can't tell me, us being the 9th largest county and the 4th worst state for human trafficking, that we've only had 2 arrests in that entire period of time? It's not a great answer to your question, but it's what the truth is. With that in mind, I know the panel will be around to answer any other questions, because I know we're past our 11 o'clock time right now, so I'm sure you'll be available, right? All right, Theresa, you have one last thing.
Yeah, I want to say, piggyback off what you said with Lorain, the woman who asked about Lorain County, right? One of the things that people have to understand is that we look at the big opiate epidemic, right? In the state of Ohio and stuff, and with Lorain County particularly too, with the opiates. Parents traffic their kids for drugs. So one of the things that I'm looking for is, where's these child sex trafficking cases? My thing is I'm advocating, I'm asking, I need to bring the Children's Services Agency, any social worker and stuff to my table so I can test them. So that's gonna be, right there is gonna show me that this is a problem. They're not trained. It's different, like I tell people, there's a difference between a presentation and a training, okay? The problem is people are not trained, and they're not trained properly. When we look at human trafficking, one of the things that really bothers me is people that are taking advantage of the need for providing education with human trafficking because of the dollars, right? And they're also taking advantage of the need for servicing victims of human trafficking. Like I said, and I'll say again, here in Lorain County, where's the safe houses? I don't see any, all right? With me not seeing any safe houses, then one of the things is, where's the people that are able to go ahead and serve victims of human trafficking, service them? Where's their qualifications? I know one of the things I'm looking for is the cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-informed care certification. I need you to make sure that multicultural competency. Look at us right here. We don't all look alike, right? So with Lorain County, there's a lot of problems here that I see with assessing why we're not seeing any child sex trafficking cases. So hopefully we're going to get some order to this disorder soon. So yeah.
I hope so as well. Everybody, on behalf of our committee, I want to thank everybody for coming out here today, listening, learning, and engaging with our panel. Our time, unfortunately, has come to a close, and I know our panel will be around if there's other questions that individuals have. And as another note, I know Dr. Carson will be in the lobby She has her book for sale and also items that she had discussed that were made by survivors of human trafficking, and she'll be available for signing, I believe, too. Is that correct? All right. I want to thank my panel for coming out today. I want to thank all their credentials. I want to thank them sharing their experiences. And I also want to thank a couple other of our survivors who were in the audience who came up on stage and told their stories as well. That takes a lot, people, to be able to do that. Thank you very much. And if you want to join us again, we'll be doing this in Avon in January, in the Wellington area in March. And please check out our website, hallforsheriff.com, because there's going to be many more community interactive education series that we're going to be doing about this to make sure that we share what needs to be done, share our experiences, and make law enforcement more reactive to what your needs are as county residents. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today.